It's been a really busy offseason for the Jaguars. Just a little over a week ago, the Jaguars hired their general manager, James Gladstone. And now, in just a little over a week, Jaguars free agency actually begins. So, we're going to give a little preview right here. I want to give a shout out to this video's sponsor, BetUS. There's a lot of different props and stuff like that you can put some money on. My favorite one is that actually Liam Cohen is tied for third place on best odds to win Coach of the Year at plus 1,200. So I can imagine that of all the new coaches, maybe Liam Cohen has the easiest path to winning their own division, which is mostly a fault of the AFC South being weak as opposed to really playing in such a strong division. But we'll definitely be interested to see if you guys are interested in any of that. You guys can use promo code YouTube150 to get a 150% deposit bonus on your first deposit up to $2,000. So thank you to BetUS for sponsoring. Now let's talk some free agency. So some key free agency dates to keep in mind. On Monday, March 10th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time is when the official tampering period begins. So it's at that point where you're going to see Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, Tom Pelissero, all those guys basically tweeting out different contracts that guys are signing. So that really occurs from Monday through Wednesday, March 12th. And at March 12th at 4 p.m. is when those deals that these guys are tweeting out actually becomes official. So yeah, Monday is a pretty fun day, a lot of madness. Even Tuesday, I remember last year the big drama was like the Jaguars trying to re-sign Calvin Ridley. They had until 4 o'clock, and then the Titans came in last minute and signed Calvin Ridley. So the Jaguars are kind of left with their hand in a bag. But then it all worked out because the Jaguars basically enabled the Jaguars to get Brian Thomas Jr. And when they drafted Brian Thomas Jr., they also accumulated more draft picks by trading back 6 spots. So that actually worked out pretty well for us. So the Jaguars do have a ton of decisions to make. The Jaguars can spend some money. They have $36.8 million available, which is the 17th most in the NFL. The Jaguars can cut some players. I think one obvious one is that they can cut Ronald Darby, cornerback, and save $2.5 million. Now, some guys that you may think about cutting, which you kind of can't because of dead cap, is Eric Armstead and Gabe Davis. Those guys are here to stay, whether you guys like it or not. Their dead cap hit is just at a point where it doesn't make sense to cut them. And you also have the two big decisions that you have to make are whether you want to keep around Christian Kirk or Evan Ingram. Now, the Jaguars need to get better at a lot of things right now. And I know a lot of people look at the passing attack and say, okay, Trevor has to get better. They got to get another outside wide receiver. But when you actually look at the offense, it's the running game that needs to dramatically get better because the Jaguars' running game really was never good under the Doug Peterson era. If you look back over the last couple of years, in 2023 they were 24th in yards per game, in rushing yards per game, and in 2024 they were 26th in rushing yards per game. And even if you go back to 2022 and they made the playoffs, they were 19th in the NFL. So it's been a while since they've actually been in the top half of the NFL, and Trevor Lawrence has truly never actually had a good run game around him. And I know that's something that Liam Cohen wants to bring, and that's one thing that he did so well with Tampa. I think Tampa had like dead last in rushing attack in 2023. And then when Liam Cohen took over in 2024, they got dramatically better and they were in the top echelon, right? So how does that happen? Obviously, you need to improve the offensive line, but you also got to get better out of your tight ends. Now, Luke Farrell is a free agent. Brenton Strange is going to still be on the Jaguars. We got to make a decision if Evan Ingram actually fits your offense and what you want to do offensively. Now, Liam Cohen utilized Cade Otton a lot in the pass game. He actually had 59 receptions and 600 yards receiving last year. But the big difference between Otton and Ingram is that Otton actually helps out tremendously in a run game, right? So he's a real dual threat type of tight end where you can have him and you can kind of keep the defense guessing on whether you're going to run the ball or pass the ball. That's not really the same thing with Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram is a willing blocker, but he's not a good blocker. So you have to make a decision on whether Evan Ingram is going to help out your offense. Is he a fit in the offense? And if Evan Ingram is not a fit in the offense, you're going to save, I believe it was like $6.5 million. Yeah, $6 million if you actually cut Evan Ingram. So that does free up a good amount of cap. So that's a decision you're going to have to make. And then that also makes tight end a sneaky big need for the Jaguars. Now, it's not something they had to address in round one, or it's not something that they had to throw a lot of money at in free agency, but I'd imagine Liam Cohen probably tries to draft a tight end to kind of fit what he wants his offense to be. Find a guy that's good at blocking. I'd prefer to find a tight end that's good at blocking and then you can kind of turn into a receiving threat. So that's what I'm looking at. And I think really Brenton Strange fits Liam Cohen's offense really well with the stuff that, with just his tools that he has. I mean, we've seen that he's being able to be a mauler in the run game, but last year we actually saw, with Evan Ingram being out, Brenton Strange started to get utilized a lot in the passing game. And I think that he has a lot of potential when it comes to helping Jags out in that category. So with Evan Ingram, I have a feeling that Evan Ingram will get cut. Now, is that the right decision? I don't know. But if it's something that Liam Cohen looks and he doesn't fit the offense, that's just something that will probably need to be done. Now, next is Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk's a tricky one because he's actually saving the Jaguars $10.5 million if they cut him. And I know we have a bunch of kind of threats on the interior of the offense when it comes to Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, Parker Washington. But, if Evan Ingram is cut, then all of a sudden it makes slot receiver that much more of a need. So with Christian Kirk, I have a feeling the Jaguars do try to restructure. And when you actually look at this wide receiver free agency class and draft class, it's not known as a very strong group, very strong class. So I have a feeling the Jaguars do what they can to restructure Christian Kirk, bring that cap number down. And just Christian Kirk being good friends with Trevor Lawrence makes it a bit easier to restructure him. So Christian Kirk, it's going to be interesting with him because he had a great rookie year, but then his second and third year on the Jaguars, they ended with season-ending injuries, right? But when he's on the field, he's effective. He generally catches the ball when thrown to him, and him and Trevor Lawrence do have a chemistry. So I'd imagine that Christian Kirk is back under a modified contract. So with that said, the Jaguars, I think, need to address a few positions in free agency. Interior offensive line. Now, I am operating on the basis that Brandon Sheriff is going to be moving on. The Jaguars will not retain him. The guy's a tough player. The guy works extremely hard. He plays through injury. I mean, I have no ill will toward Brandon Sheriff like I have against maybe Zane Beadles or, dare I say, Andrew Norwell. So I think Sheriff is gone. So with that said, I think that opens up a couple things. I mean, the right guard spot is completely open. I don't think anybody on the roster that can fill that spot right now. So I think the Jaguars do address somebody on the interior offensive line in some capacity. And then I think that you dedicate some draft capital to getting an interior offensive lineman. So, and I think the Jaguars need to continue to add to the defensive line. I think the defensive line addition will probably happen in the draft because you have some guys there, obviously Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker on the outside, so you need to bring in another edge rusher in some sense. You can usually get that for pretty cheap in free agency if you want to sign a guy to like a one-year deal. You also, on the interior of the defensive line, you have Mason Smith, which you just drafted last year. He should get better next year. Jordan Jefferson, Devon Hamilton, also a couple run-stopping guys. Of course, Eric Armstead will move to the interior, but you need to continue to add bodies there. And, that feels like right now the favorite there is Mason Graham at pick number 5 overall. That'll greatly improve your defensive line. And I know we've heard really everybody from Liam Cohen to Tony Boselli all speak about needing to build the trenches up. So that's definitely something to look at. Safety, right now your safety position is a big question mark. I mean, Andre Sisco is going to be a free agent. I don't see him coming back. Even if we sign him to like a cheap contract, then that would mean that he would probably be a backup in some sense. And is he a better special teamer than a Daniel Thomas or an Andrew Wingard? I don't think so. So I think the Jaguars move on from Andre Sisco. So I think that the Jaguars could potentially spend some money on a safety in free agency. And I think Darnell Savage potentially will be the other starting safety. The good thing is that um, Anthony Campanelle, coming from Green Bay, has a lot of experience with what Darnell Savage can do. So, with that said, I think he'll really understand what to do with him. And also, cornerback. With cornerback, I have a feeling maybe they sign a cheap cornerback in free agency and then go out and draft a quarterback, just because I think you can probably find a good one on day 2 of the draft. And even if they want to draft number 5 overall, if Mason Graham gets drafted, a couple quarterbacks, and all of a sudden Travis Hunter falls to you at pick number 5, then boom, you have a starting cornerback there. So obviously a lot of unknown, but I think they probably sign a cheap cornerback, hopefully a younger cornerback than a 30-year-old cornerback like Ronald Darby was, but I think they signed somebody to kind of fill that hole. So with that said, some names to look out for. I think one guy that's been drawing a lot of attention from really the Jaguars on Twitter is center Drew Dahlman from the Falcons. It does not appear that Drew Dahlman will be signing back with the Falcons. And with that said, the Jaguars have Mitch Morse, but he's in his 30s. Drew Dahlman will actually be a true plug and start center for the Jaguars, and he almost turns into a building block because you look at the Jaguars right now. On the offensive line, you have a cheap right tackle in Anton Harrison, who's going on to year 3 of his rookie deal. Then at your left tackle, you have Walker Little, who's on a very favorable deal. And we've seen him play some good football when called upon, and I think it's going to be good to allow him to have a full year as the starting offensive tackle from day 1 of training camp to be able to see how he flourishes in that role. And then the Jaguars on the interior also have Ezra Cleveland at left guard, who's on a pretty favorable deal, who is good when healthy. And then the Jaguars have holes at center and right guard. So Mitch Morse, on the last year of his deal, he's still pretty cheap, but I imagine the Jaguars still try to improve. And if they bring in a center like Drew Dahlman, then it opens up you to be able to draft an interior offensive lineman and just kind of plug him at right guard on day 1. And hopefully the board falls to us that way. So yeah, I think the Jaguars spend the most money on a center, and then they move on. Or not even center, but just some kind of interior offensive lineman. Some other guys available, guard Will Fries from Indianapolis. Mekhi Becton, who was drafted by the Jets in the first round to play, I believe it was left tackle. And most recently, he actually moved to right guard for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I'm not sure if he's going to look to move back to a tackle spot. He had a really good year last year, obviously leading the Eagles to a Super Bowl, and he was healthy. And the big thing about him has been his bill of health and also his conditioning, and he was good in both respects. So you put him in a good organization with a stable culture, and everything worked out for him. And I know a lot of us used to talk about Trey Smith. Trey Smith, the guard from Kansas City, was tagged by the Kansas City Chiefs. So in order to get him, he had to trade some draft capital, and I don't imagine the Jaguars do that. And it sounds like the Kansas City Chiefs want to keep him. So that's what that is. So that's the interior offensive line. Now I have a feeling the Jaguars do spend some money at safety. 2 guys that pop out to me. The best safety in the free agency market will be Javon Holland. He was in Miami most recently. 24 years old, so still an extremely young guy. And he's actually the guy that potentially ended the Jaguar season before it started. He's the guy that stripped the ball from Travis Etienne before going into the end zone against the Miami Dolphins, and then the whole course of that game changed like crazy. He's a prolific player. Also, a guy that I'd be intrigued by is Justin Reed from Kansas City. 28 years old, comes from a winning culture and winning organization, and especially with a young team like we have when it comes to coaching, it would be nice to have some veteran leadership in here, and that's exactly what he brings. He brings the veteran plus all the playoff experience that he brings as well. So that's the name I'd look out for on safety. And I think the Jaguars do spend some money at safety instead of finding a rookie and plugging him. Now, cornerback, like I said, I think the Jaguars probably go cheaper here. Maybe like a Byron Murphy from the Vikings, Mike Jackson from the Panthers. He's 28 years old. Asante Samuels Jr. from the Chargers. I can't believe he's already a free agent. I feel like he just got drafted, but he's a name. Asante Samuel Jr. from Florida State. He's a name that I look for the Jaguars to potentially sign. I'm not sure how cheap these guys will be, or even if these guys will be available, but I have a feeling the Jaguars plug another Band-Aid at the spot. I think last year the strategy was fine, but I think you went a little bit too old. I'd like to sign a cornerback under 30 because once you hit that 30 mark, your lack of speed starts to show up, and then you can become quite the liability. So that's with that. Now, another spot I won't speak too much on, but the Jaguars need a backup quarterback. Trevor Lawrence right now is the only quarterback under contract. The guy that I'd go after, honestly, I don't even need to name a bunch of names. It's Kyle Trask. He is, obviously from Florida Gators. Spent the last 4 years in Tampa Bay, and the thing that I like about him mostly is that he is young, but also he's one of the only quarterbacks that have spent time in Liam Cohen's system, right? So being able to have a guy that comes over from Tampa that can be with Trevor Lawrence as they transition to a new system. Transitioning to new systems is very tough. So I think having a guy that's already been in it and knows what Liam Cohen expects from it will be very valuable. And I think that would be a much better route to go than there's any other guys. I know like Zach Wilson will be available, and there's also like Jacoby Brissett if you want to go older, Andy Dalton. I feel like Kyle Trask would be the move. So that is kind of going to wrap up some things to look out for in free agency. It's going to be a lot of fun. I always love free agency. So really the point of this free agency is to be able to get these free agents so it will allow you to really go into the draft and draft best available player. That's the name of the game, right? Draft best available player. Then just let James Gladstone cook. I mean, got a number 5 pick in the first round, second round pick, 2 third-round picks, 2 fourth-round picks. So you got a lot of draft capital to be looking out for. And I'm honestly at the point where I'm not going to complain about anything this regime does, because I remember I started complaining a lot about what Trent Baalke did, but now I got a new unit. They know a lot more than me, so I'm going to blindly follow them until they give me a reason not to believe in them, right? So really exciting. I can't wait. The Jaguars is the new era, so let's get this thing and run with it. And thank you guys so much for watching the video. Please, guys, on your way out, drop a like for me. Also, big shout out to BetUS for sponsoring this video, and go Jags.